not going to have Pepsi with baby flavoring in it. I mean, what the hell have we become? Excuse me. Woo! Get some!
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Ugranik is sparing with you guys. We got the usual. We got Republican fights, Trump versus DeSantis. That one's a doozy. We got criticism for both parties as usual, right? And we have Ukraine. So let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Together, we've committed nearly 700 tanks and thousands of armored vehicles. 1,000 artillery systems, more than 2 million rounds of artillery ammunition, more than 50 advanced launch rocket systems, anti-ship and air defense systems, all to defend Ukraine, and that doesn't count the other $500 million we're announcing with you today and tomorrow. That's going to be coming your way.
President Joe Biden announced yet another round of military aid to Ukraine, this time to the tune of $500 million. Now, in the video that you just watched, he described all the different ways in which the United States has provided military weaponry to Ukraine in its effort to defend itself against Russia's invasion. Now, Biden, in this next clip, talks about what he plans to provide in the coming weeks. Let's watch.
Just today, that announcement includes artillery ammunition for HIMARS and howitzers, more javelins, anti-armor systems, air surveillance radars to help protect Ukrainian people from aerial bombardments. Later this week, we will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade sanctions and backfill Russia's war machine.
The United States has already allocated a whopping $113 billion in military aid to Ukraine, and it doesn't appear that they intend to stop providing military aid. So that is the $113 billion is what was already provided. The $500 million is what was just announced by Biden during the Munich Security Conference. Anthony Blinken also has some pretty serious accusations against China. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we have the usual absurdities from all sides. Right-wingers now saying he went on President's Day, our President's Day. He spent in a foreign country. Oh, shut up. No one cares. That's not the real criticism you want to do here. It's not like there isn't real criticism. We spent $113 billion. Are you sure that we should spend more? I'm not positive. We're gonna get to our hypocrisy in regards to China in a second. And guys, the easy answer isn't, that's it, withdraw all support from Ukraine, or that's it, pour in another $113 billion to Ukraine. No, the question is what's in our best interest and what is going to bring this conflict to hopefully a peaceful resolution as quickly as possible. And the answers are almost never in the extremes.
Right, well, okay, so this story, as with any news story, is far more nuanced than what you're likely seeing in other news outlets, okay? First, let me just note, so that speech was given by President Joe Biden in Kyiv. He visited Ukraine for the first time, so that is the reason why Republicans are attacking him, arguing that he shouldn't be in Ukraine during President's Day, which is a ridiculous critique, to say the least. But over the weekend, the Munich Security Conference took place, and during the Munich Security Conference, we heard from a spokesperson from China's foreign ministry respond to accusations from the United States State Department in regard to China potentially offering lethal weapons to Russia in its invasion in Ukraine. Now, here is a statement from US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. He made the rounds on the Sunday morning news shows. Here's one example of that.
And you talk about this lethal aid. What evidence do you have of that? What makes you think they're about to send lethal aid to the Russians for the war in Ukraine?
Martha, what I can tell you is this. First of all, from day one, almost quite literally, because President Biden spoke to President Xi a couple of weeks into the Russian aggression back last March, and said to him that it would be a deep concern to us if China provided lethal support to Russia or helped in the systematic evasion of sanctions. And part of the reason for that conversation going back to last March was just a few weeks before, President Putin and President Xi had met and they talked about a partnership with no limits. And we were very concerned that no limits might include significant support to Russia in its aggression. We've been watching this very, very closely. And for the most part, China has been engaged in providing rhetorical, political, diplomatic support to Russia. But we have information that gives us concern that they are considering providing lethal support to Russia.
There were no details about the alleged information that the US State Department has in regard to China. But make no mistake, I mean, he mentions the rhetorical support, and that's what certainly bothers the US State Department. China has not taken a stance against Russia. China is also looking to its own self-interest, as any country would, and they're considering basically their relationship with the West, particularly Germany and France. They want to rebuild their relationship with those two countries. And at the same time, they see Russia as an important ally to serve as a counterbalance to Western power, to the United States. So it's a far more complicated situation. I'm not gonna believe that China's thinking about providing lethal weapons to Russia unless there's actual evidence to back that up. The State Department loves to throw out some pretty antagonizing, statements against China, and I don't think that's smart.
Okay, so come on, let's talk about our hypocrisy. Don't be ridiculous. China is considering providing lethal aid. All of a sudden, aid is called lethal when referring to China. But when we sent $113 billion worth of missiles and ammunition and all sorts of weapons, that was not lethal aid. And by the way, the dutiful press corps, as always, bow their heads to the people in power and do their propaganda. Our aid is never called lethal aid. And remember, China hasn't sent the dime yet. We're not, even the warmongers at the basically the Biden administration have not said that China has sent a dime, but they're contemplating lethal aid. Who are you guys kidding, right? So is China gonna consider their own interest? What do you want them to do? Consider our interest first? Would we do that for them? Could you imagine if our leader was like, we should consider China first, right? Of course China's gonna consider their interest first. Do they have interest in protecting their alliance with Russia? Of course they do. Now look, what Russia did was terrible. It invaded a sovereign country, and it is a war of aggression. It is 100% Russia's fault. So I'm not in favor of that war. I hate that war, and I hate that Russia started it. But am I a realist that I know that China is going to consider, hey, maybe if we're gonna do some action in Taiwan, we might wanna have Russia on our side. Hey, you know what? If the rest of the world is rejecting Russian oil and gas, and we can get it for cheap, maybe we should consider Russian oil and gas. Of course they're gonna consider those things. So, and then if Blinken and corporate media, of course, going along with it, if they all come back with, well, did you know that Russia started that war of aggression? Yeah, I just told you that, right? Did you know we started the war of aggression in Iraq? And so would we have been like, can you believe countries sending lethal aid to America as they did the invasion of Iraq for no goddamn reason? So our hypocrisy is screaming so loud,
right?
As, by the way, not just politicians, but the media tries to protect the American people from seeing and hearing that obvious hypocrisy.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because during the Munich Security Conference, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry responded to the accusations coming from the US State Department. Asked about the accusations from Blinken and other US officials, Wang Wenbin, a spokesman for the foreign ministry, suggested that on the contrary, it was the United States that was implicated in bloodshed in Ukraine. He continues to say, quote, it's the US and not China that has been incessantly supplying weapons to the battlefield, and the US is not qualified to issue any orders to China.
Show me the lie.
Right, there is no lie. That statement is actually pretty accurate. In fact, I want to go to a quick a video featuring the spokesperson for China's foreign ministry and some of the other statements that he issued.
It is the US, not China, that is providing a steady stream of weapons on the battlefield. The United States is in no position to make demands of China. We will never accept the US pointing fingers at Sino-Russian relations or even coercing us.
He also said, quote, Washington should stop shirking responsibility and disseminating fake news. China will continue firmly standing on the side of dialogue and on the side of peace. And I should note, look, there's something that's kind of been bothering me about the US strategy, right? Because while I've said a million times before, the United States made security guarantees to Ukraine after Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. That was what was negotiated with the United States back in the 1990s. Okay, that doesn't mean that there should be a blank military aid check provided to Ukraine, and there should be more of an effort to pursue peace negotiations. Now, I'm starting to think that the US is actually, their actions are counter to pressuring peace negotiations. I'll tell you why. In April of 2022, Lloyd Austin, who is the defense secretary, specifically said, candidly said, that the US wants the Russian military weakened from the Ukraine invasion. Okay, they want Russia to deplete all of their military capability and have a difficult time rebuilding their military capability once this war is over. Now, if you strike a peace deal early on in the war, is the US gonna get what it wants in regard to weakening Russia? No.
Yeah, there's more to that too. So guys, again, nuance here. A lot on the right and the left make it seem like Ukraine's the bad guys. Like, oh, did you hear about that Nazi division inside the Ukrainian? Oh, they're poor Russians are being attacked by the Ukrainian civilians. What the hell do you want them to do? They invaded their country. Of course, Ukraine's going to fight back. So my heart's with the Ukrainian people, and I'm glad that we helped them. Now, having said that, do we also have nefarious interests in America? Of course we do.
Definitely.
Of course. So guys, look, think about two things. Why don't we want peace negotiations, or why are we not pushing more aggressively in that direction? You could say, hey, Ukraine has a battlefield advantage and we want to press that. Maybe that's true, but that's up to the Ukrainians, right? But mainly for us, there's two things. One is we want Russia depleted because we realize after our debacle in Iraq and Afghanistan, hey, it turns out invading these countries is a real pain in the ass. and siphons away a ton of money. Now we remember our elites, the people in power, did not mind that at all, because the money that was drained away from American coffers went straight to their donors, the defense contractors, etc. So they love that we lost trillions of dollars there. But they also want Russia to lose trillions of dollars to even up the odds a little bit. But there's a second component. The longer the war goes on, the more Russia becomes alienated from the rest of the world, and that's why they're furious at China for not alienating Russia. Why do we care about that? Yeah, geopolitical interests, military interests, but more importantly, energy interests, okay? Russia used to supply energy to Germany and to a lot of Europe through the pipelines, Nord Stream 1, and they were gonna open up Nord Stream 2. There is excellent evidence to indicate that America bombed Nord Stream 1 in the middle of this war. And so that is, and by the way, that's a war crime. By the way, that's an attack against arguably not only Russia, but Germany, okay? And Germany was investigating it, then all of a sudden decided to end their investigation instantly. Gee, I wonder why. If they had found out it was Russia who did it, they would not have ended it. If they find out it's their ally that did it, they end it.
What is the US doing? They're playing with fire.
Of course they are, but why are they doing it, guys? Again, this is not a partisan issue. Republican, Democrat, in reality, it doesn't matter. The reason why the people in power do it is because they're funded by the energy companies. So those energy companies are going to make billions of dollars, maybe even trillions, because now Europe and other parts of the world are forced to buy from our energy companies. The money doesn't go to us, it doesn't go to the US taxpayers. It goes only to the executives and the shareholders of those companies, which then share a tiny percentage with the corrupt politicians who use it as campaign contributions. That's the #1 reason why we're dragging our feet and don't want to get to peace in Ukraine. Meanwhile, China figures, hey, listen, the quicker I wrap this thing up, their economic interests are better served. But I don't give a damn, I want peace. So I don't care about their economic interests, and I certainly don't care about ExxonMobil and the other guys' economic interests. Let's get to goddamn peace already. But our guys won't do it because they're warmongers. And the last thing is, our guys are also picking a fight with China.
Yes.
So not only are we saying, oh, I can't believe you would consider lethal aid, as we pour lethal aid not only into Ukraine, but this is the most important part. We just did a multi-billion-dollar deal where we sent weapons to Taiwan, which would be characterized by us as lethal aid, okay? So China could turn around and go, oh my God, dude, those guys, we might be in a war with them at some point, and that could kill Chinese civilians all through lethal aid. We're picking a fight and picking a fight. And why? Defense contractor industry, energy company industry, and by the way, bankers too that speculate on all of this, etc. Because our politicians don't work for us, they work for those donors.
Absolutely. All right, we do have to take a quick break. When we come back, Marianne Williamson will be joining us for a conversation. We're going to be talking about the presidential election in 2024 and more on what's happening in the country. So stick around, we have that conversation and more coming right up.
The concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion. that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
Like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong. We spun a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow.
And then best writers in the country are right here on this panel with the obvious exception of John.
In a lot of ways.
Why is he lying? Because these are acts that you can commit with impunity.
Most of us are usually in boxer shorts underneath.
I went with the pants today.
This is the first ever power panel with Donald Trump as president.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
We have to stop pretending that race is not an issue in this country.
Now keep in mind, racism had gone away until Barack Obama brought it back.
That's right.
They want to protect life so much that they want to ensure that insurance companies don't cover your maternity care.
There is so much heinous news out there. That's why we've got to laugh, not to cry. So join me, Francesca Fiorentini, and some of my progressive friends, comedians, actors, experts, and activists, as we deliver an hour of laughter and analysis every week on my podcast, The Bituation Room. The Bituation Room is an invitation for all of us to take ourselves a little bit less seriously while still giving you some concrete ideas for action. New episodes are available every single week. So join the Frantifa and listen to The Bituation Room on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your TYT network podcasts. And make sure to subscribe and give the show 5 stars, because I like stars.
Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. We're going to talk to Marianne Williamson a little bit and get her thoughts about a very interesting topic that's in the news. But I wanted to thank Walter Romero, Jeffrey Hendricks, and Marshall Travis, who all just became new members by hitting the join button below the video on YouTube. You guys are amazing. Thank you for helping to make this show possible. Everybody can do it at tyt.com/join. Casper.
All right, well, let's give you all an update on East Palestine, Ohio. Last Wednesday, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine told the residents of East Palestine, Ohio, that their water had been tested and is safe to drink. Of course, this follows a terrible train derailment in the area, which led to what was referred to as a controlled burn of toxic chemicals that the train was carrying. Those toxic chemicals are thought to have seeped into groundwater, potentially harming the water source in the area. But of course, the authorities have said repeatedly that they've tested the water is safe. Now we find out, thanks to an investigation by Huffington Post or HuffPost, that those tests were actually done by a consulting firm that was on Norfolk Southern's payroll, which is a clear conflict of interest here. And not only that, we're also learning that the samples that they utilized in order to carry out these tests were deeply flawed. So let's give you the details. So The reporting is by Chris D'Angelo. Just want to give him credit for this. Now, Norfolk Southern contracted a company known as AECOM in order to carry out these tests of the water. They sampled water both from municipal water and untreated water from 5 municipal wells for their tests. And here's where the issues come in, okay? 5 of the 6 collected samples had pH or acidity levels that exceeded the 2 pH limit allowed under the EPA method listed in the analysis for detecting volatile organic compounds, rendering them inappropriately preserved, or improperly, I should say, preserved. One sample also contained a large air bubble in its vial, while the EPA method requires that the sample bottles should not have any trapped air bubbles when sealed, the report states. Now, some experts have weighed in on this. David Erickson, a hydrogeologist and the founder of Water and Environmental Technologies, an environmental consulting firm in Montana, called the sampling sloppy and amateur. Due to improper sampling protocols, there could have been more contaminants in the sample than what showed on the analytical, Erickson said. Cenk, I do not begrudge anyone for lacking trust toward government statements, local government statements about how safe the water is. I mean, my mind goes back to what happened in Flint, Michigan, when the people of Flint, Michigan were told that their water was safe, even though it was just contaminated with lead. Even Obama pretended to drink a glass of water from Flint during a press conference, and testing indicated that the water was not in fact safe. It had lead in it. And so, look, the way that they did the testing here is a huge problem. And again, I think that the people of East Palestine should be incredibly careful.
So the theme of this segment will be similar to you guys. It's corporate Republicans and Democrats protecting corporations, which is what they always do. So why would you, and by the way, oftentimes corporate media going along with it, of course. So why would you humor these guys and go, oh yeah, why don't you hire your own amateur testers and have them test the water and go, oh, the water that you might have contaminated, you tell us is perfectly fine in order to avoid lawsuits. Okay, that sounds pretty, come on guys. Don't you know anything about business? Of course you're gonna try to avoid liability. They're facing tons and tons of liability from civil lawsuits.
Right, exactly.
There's no chance, there's a 0% chance that they would have hired a firm that said the water was contaminated and toxic and that they were at fault. Anyone who knows business knows that. Come on. So what do they're both the DeWine, the Republican, corporate Republican, and Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg, the corporate Democrats do? They're in a giant cover your ass operation, not even for anything they did wrong, although you could argue that and we will, but for what the company did wrong.
1000%.
Because all the beloved companies must be protected at all costs.
And guys, get a load of this, okay? So Norfolk Southern was asked to comment about the, this revelation that the water samples were not properly, gathered and tested. And so in response to that, the rail company stated that AECOM ran a second test. They did. They ran a second test with samples that did comply with EPA standards, but the test was not recorded correctly.
Oh, yeah, golly gee.
I mean, okay. Unbelievable.
So by the way, an expert called them amateurs. That's why I use that word. But I don't care if they're the most professional company in the world. I don't test these things for a living. I'm not positive. You can't have the guy responsible for the accident test the water.
Exactly.
There's no way in the world they wouldn't be obsessed with liability litigation costs. There's no way, no corporate executive in their right mind would hire a company and have them say it's your fault and you owe people hundreds of millions of dollars. This is what I'm talking about, the fiction that corporations have your best interest in mind. It's absurd.
It really is. Now, I should also note that the Columbiana County General Health District also sampled and tested water around East Palestine. They're saying that their tests ended up matching AECOM's results, but they also told HuffPost that they only got the results of their tests back until after DeWine had announced that the water was in fact safe. But look, we should also judge with our own eyes. The authorities may agree that the water is safe, but it's hard to take their word for it when the creek looks like this. Okay, so there's the creek. It does not typically look like that according to residents in the area. The Ohio State EPA has stated that they're still testing the water tests are ongoing, and if they find that the water, the iridescent water is contaminated, then they'll let the people of East Palestine know. For now, from what I've read, the residents in the area are not taking the official's word for, at face value. They're using bottled water. Some of the residents who have showered using the water have developed some rashes. Some are complaining about headaches. We've shown you video of some of the creeks that have dead frogs and dead fish within them. So again, it's understandable why people would be distrusting toward the statements coming from both the local EPA and also from this contractor that Norfolk Southern has hired to do the water testing.
And the Biden administration, which has generally been full of crap on this, and which we're gonna get to in a second. Look, I've read that it's possible with these chemicals that you could have the nausea, the headaches, the dizziness, etc., but not have it be long-term negative health consequences. I hope so. Is that for sure? No, it's definitely not for sure. Is the water contaminated? Well, obviously it is. We've seen all the dead fish. But yet, corporate media and corporate politicians, they say, no, don't believe your lying eyes. And why have we eroded faith in our government and in our systems and in our institutions? Because they never represent us. So now it's so bad that, I vote Democratic, but a Democratic administration tells me that the water's fine. I don't believe them. I don't believe them at all. I believe Buttigieg has not regulated them 1%. It looks like he would regulate them only under, you can't get him to do it.
Well,
now he pretends he's gonna urge. There's a lot of urging coming.
So this is a headline, literally, this is the headline coming from Reuters. Buttigieg urges US railroads to boost safety, not oppose reforms. Who's in charge here? What do you mean you're urging them to improve their safety protocols? You have the ability to regulate them and force them to beef up their safety. Are you gonna do it? So let's talk about that a little bit. Now, Buttigieg, of course, has been getting a lot of backlash from people who are actually paying attention and wanting to hold government officials accountable for their unwillingness to hold rail companies accountable and regulate rail companies. Now this is what we're finding. So the White House announced this last week on Friday. The Department of Transportation is working on numerous fronts to improve rail safety, including managing over $4 billion in discretionary grant programs designed to improve rail safety and eliminate at-grade rail crossings. Department of Transportation is also working on rulemaking to improve rail safety, including proposing a rule that would require a minimum of a 2-person train crew size for safety reasons, a major priority for rail workers. Also, the Department of Transportation is developing a notice of proposed rulemaking that will require railroads to provide real-time information on the contents of tank cars to authorized emergency response officials responding to or investigating an incident involving the transportation of hazardous materials by rail. Yeah, okay. What are you guys gonna do in regard to improving or updating the train's braking system? That's point number one. What are you gonna do to reclassify some of the toxic chemicals that are not considered toxic enough, I guess, to have the beefed up safety protocols during transportation? I mean, there's a lot here that they're not talking about, and it's concerning to say the least, because it makes me think they're just issuing a statement to make it appear as though they're gonna regulate. But once everyone's focused on a different story, once everyone's moved on, they're gonna move on. That's what I'm concerned about here.
The number one reason establishment Democrats and the elites love Buttigieg is because they think he's really smart. Oh, it turns them on so much. He went to Harvard. He learned Norwegian just to read a book. No, he didn't. That's such an obvious lie. Jesus Christ, guys. But okay, I want to ask them, do you really think Pete Buttigieg is this dumb? I'm gonna get to why in a second. Okay, so he says, and I'm gonna quote from a different article than Anna. Reuters explains he would call on major railroads to improve safety. Oh, he's calling on them to do it. Wow, sure they'll take the call. Okay. He says they also explain he would also urge Congress to raise the cap on fines, etc. Oh, he's urging Congress. There's a lot of urging going on. They say Buttigieg said he would soon outline specific safety improvements that they should take. Okay, I can go like literally a whole article. I don't want to take up the whole show. Is should, could, maybe, considering, thinking about, deeply ruminating.
Come on, I mean, it's ridiculous.
So guys, okay, so this is my question to the establishment Democrats who think he's such a genius. Do you think corporations work that way? They also said that he did a strongly worded letter to them.
Yeah.
That they go, hey, you know, this provision could cost me $28 million, which by the way I should pay because I make billions and this is safety precautions so people in Ohio don't die, etc. But it's gonna cost me $28 million. On the other hand, I've been urged by the Department of Transportation to do something.
Listen.
Come on, really? Is Buttigieg that stupid that he thinks corporations are human beings and if he urges them that they'll do the right thing? Please don't tell me you're that stupid, okay? And by the way, that applies to everyone in media. Yes, they are. They're definitely that dumb.
Norfolk Southern spent $1.8 million on lobbying in 2022 alone. Just on the 2022 midterm elections, they spent $1.8 million on lobbying. Do you think they did that out of the kindness of their own hearts? They just wanted to do charity for politicians? Or did it have to do with the fact that they do not want to be regulated, which is why when it comes to political affiliation, they don't really discriminate. Democrat, Republican, they don't care. They give and they give generously to prevent these politicians from regulating them. So when Pete Buttigieg urges these rail companies to beef up their safety measures, urging is the exact word that communicates to all of us that he ain't gonna do anything, okay? He's gonna leave it to the rail companies, which of course have a profit motive and have a fiduciary responsibility to return on investment for their shareholders. He's gonna urge them to do the right thing. For corporations, the only thing they are built to do is to increase profits. And safety measures cuts into those profits. That's the way it works. Buttigieg knows it. He's actually not stupid. He thinks we're stupid, and that's the problem.
Exactly, and by the way, corporate media very much obliges him. Oh yeah, Buttigieg has been so strong in all of his urgings. Okay, let me give you two more things. Buttigieg said, rather than support these efforts to improve rail safety, Norfolk Southern and other rail companies spent millions of dollars in courts and lobbying members of Congress to oppose common sense safety regulations. Okay, all right, you got the point. Wait, you thought they were gonna voluntarily support their own regulation and having to pay millions of dollars in costs during the Obama administration? That's what he's referring to. That's what you thought they were gonna do. And you, golly gee, you are a guest to find out they didn't for the 2000th time in a row, right? Okay, but wait a minute, they spent all this money on lobbying. Who'd they spend it on? That was during the Obama administration. Oh right, they spent it on your Democratic colleagues. You make it sound like it's a problem that exists floating out there in the sky somewhere, right? No, why don't you talk about the other end of corruption? Right-wingers and Republicans never talk about the business end. They're like, oh, big bad government, can you believe how corrupt they are? They never tell you who corrupted them, okay? Who corrupted them are the people who gave them campaign donations, like all of these companies, right? The left wing, on the other hand, is like, can you believe the corruption? And then they never explain who took the money. Well, you all took the bribes. Buttigieg, you took thousands of dollars, thousands, that was hilarious. Hundreds of millions of dollars, I believe, in your campaign, if not certainly tens of millions of dollars in legalized bribes from all these different kinds of companies. Why do you think they gave you the money, Pete? You think it was for the general welfare? No, it was a legal bribe, and you never call on anybody. By the way, the Trump administration, as always, was worse. Obama was considering the rules. Trump just tore them up and said, hell no, I would never regulate any company. I'm gonna let them ruin you. And one more thing, Buttigieg wrote in his letter to the companies, this must change. Well, dude, you're the regulator. Your job is to change it, not ask them and beseech them to change it. It's like telling a robber, you must stop breaking and entering. Well, is there any law against it? Oh no, there's no law at all. You can just go take anybody's stuff you like. Well, I strongly urge you to cease and desist at once. No, pass the goddamn law, making them do it. That's literally your job.
When we come back from the break, Marianne Williamson will be joining us for an interview. Stick around.
Lots of you were written in along similar lines that we were raging about on the East Palestine disaster. Ashura Azumi wrote in the member section, I thought it was normal for water to have a rainbow floating on top of it. Mickey C. the Silver Dragon wrote in, some of these diseases that the toxins can cause take a longer time to appear, even a year or more. Those in charge are hoping enough time goes by where they can claim it's been too long to blame the wreck. That sounds about right. Kabuki Dragon says, it's wokeness that causes rainbows on water. That's what's been turning those frogs gay. I mean, look, we live in an insane world, right? You know, jokers to the right of us, clowns to the left of us, or whichever way that it goes. And so the right wing is like, oh, can you believe it? It's the frogs, the gay, the rainbows. Diversity is the real problem. Diversity is the problem. No, it's safety regulations that are the problem, you schmuck. Diversity didn't make the train crash. The safety regulations in regards to hazardous chemicals, brakes, and staffing and inspections is what made the train crash. But we can't get anyone in media to talk rationally because they're paid not to talk rationally. Okay, Kabuki Dragon with a comment that was similar to my breaking and entering one at the end of the last segment. He says, up next, the GOP will allow accused rapists to test their rape kits for their own trial. I mean, look, it's not even Republicans, it's corporate Democrats and Republicans. Oh yeah, we let the person who did the giant train wreck tell us that it was perfectly fine. Yes, the rape test kit analogy is unfortunately apt. Shy Coltrane 42 said, just renewed my membership. Ha, okay, I appreciate the enthusiasm there too. Don't shoot up the goalkeeper says, so Biden can fly halfway across the world to Ukraine to reassure them of aid, but he won't fly to East Palestine, Ohio to reassure that he'll help them. Wow. Now, he did have a foreign policy trip planned already, okay? And I don't mind the trip to Ukraine, but I do mind that it won't go anywhere near East Palestine because no, corporations must be protected. How else is Buttigieg going to finance his next presidential campaign? He had the transportation industry all locked up for all those donations. Oh, don't make him ruin that. I mean, the beloved corporate demagogues have to have funding for their elections. Biden flavored corn pop says, exactly, Jake. The US military industrial bank media complex is picking a fight with China, and I am 100% with China regardless of their human rights issues because my own country values human rights way less. I'm not on either one of their sides. China has a terrible human rights issue. We have terrible human rights issues. You call them both out. You don't excuse either one. But they continued. China has eradicated so much poverty in their own country, and they have 1.5 billion people. They overcame all the colonialism the US joined in on, and their 100 years of shame. I want to learn more about how they did it. Well, that part is true, and great credit to China for uplifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and they were deeply oppressed, mainly by Britain for a long time, and then us. But that's a very long story. All right, thank you guys, we'll be back.
I'm not one of those people that believes everything he says. However, he puts an interesting spin on turning the frogs gay, for example.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys.
All right. Joining us now is author, spiritual leader, and political activist Marianne Williamson. Marianne, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So I'm going to get started with something that caught my attention recently. So it was reported that you have formed an exploratory committee for a potential run for president in 2024. You also had noted that you have a big announcement coming up on March 4th. You want to maybe speed up that announcement and say something about it on this show?
Well, when you kind of say I'm announcing that I'm going to have an announcement on March 4th, you're sort of, winking, and I think everybody realizes that. And it's certainly been out there that I was going to, that I've had the exploratory, and I've done this sort of due diligence of figuring out whether or not it would be foolhardy to the extent of futile, or whether there is a compelling reason for me to run. And I feel that I've come up with the answer as far as my own heart, my own gut register. And I'll be talking about that, and I'll be on live stream. I'll be in Washington, D.C., and I'll let people know how I'm feeling, where I think the country has been, where I think the country is, and where I think the country needs to go.
Well, speaking of that, you recently published a piece in your Substack titled, "A New America is Struggling to Be Born, but it won't be birthed unless we birth it." And you touched on so many issues that we have in the country, but what really struck me was your emphasis on how corruption has really hurt this country in many ways. You write, "We don't need any more evidence that the system has become deeply, intrinsically corrupt. We can see it in the broken windows, shuttered factories, and violent crime in our once thriving communities. We can see it in the hollowed eyes and addiction-rattled brokenness of our fellow citizens." You also write, quote, "We can see it in the mass despair of millions of Americans who work hard all day yet cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment, who were holding on but now find themselves homeless, who are struggling with anxiety born of constant economic uncertainty, who tried their best to get into the game but have found the game so rigged against them." Marianne, if you had a magic wand and there was one main issue that you could really focus on and solve, what would that issue be?
If I could only do one, it would be universal health care. We have 500,000 Americans who go into medical debt every year. We have 68,000 Americans who die every year for lack of health care. We have 85 Americans who are either underinsured or uninsured. We have an $88 billion total medical debt. And I think when you consider the fact that produces so much economic anxiety in so many people's lives. We have 64% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, 60% of Americans who could not absorb a $400 unexpected expenditure. Healthcare alone would really take that level of despair and drop it quite a bit. You know what we all need to realize is exactly what you were saying before about East Palestine. What happened in East Palestine is a feature, it's not a bug, of the way the current system works. And it's exactly the corruption. What I was talking about in that article is exactly the corruption that you and Cenk were talking about over the last few minutes. The deregulation, the fact that for the sake of short-term profits, it's not just the railroad companies, it's the insurance companies, it's big oil, it's the pharmaceutical companies, it's big agricultural companies, it's big chemical companies, it's big food companies, it's a military-industrial complex. It's the system itself. It's not just one industry and it's not just one incident. And as long as you put short-term economic profits before the health and safety and well-being of people and animals and planets, we are going to get more and more East Palestinians. But this is the thing. It's not like one particular institution. Slavery was one institution. You got to end it with institutionalized oppression of women. We need suffrage. One institution that needs to be removed. Segregation, one institution. Today, it's more like an atomizer spray. An atomizer spray of injustice. It's the racial inequality in our criminal justice system here. It's infiltration of white supremacists into our police there. It is lack of health care over here. It is the fact that people don't have healthy food over there. It is the East Palestinians. It is the economic, it is the environmental injustice of it all. It is the fact that we have such high rates of chronic illness in this country, and of course, the war machine in the United States. So at this point, we need to recognize that the system is so deeply corrupt that the corruption is baked into the cake. And at this point, I don't think the system is going to disrupt itself. That's really what you've been talking about here. Pete Buttigieg is a Democrat. So we know how the Republicans feel. They're just a kind of like nosedive for our democracy and our society. But the Democrats are kind of a managed decline at this point. So when you ask me what one thing, yeah, the one thing would be healthcare, but really it's the issue underlying all those issues, and that is neoliberalism itself. It's the fact that we've had a 50-year aberrational chapter of American society where trickle-down economics, unregulated capitalism, whatever you want to call it, has led to this decimation of the American middle class. We've had, I think Rand Corporation said we've had over the last 48 years, we've had $50 trillion of resources, of money that has gone from the bottom 90% to the 1%. So we need genuine economic reform at this point. It's more than just healthcare. It's more than that. It's also a livable wage. It's also maternity leave. It's also free college. It's all those things that we know and that you talk about all the time.
So Marianne, you just laid out a really important case against corporate Democrats, corporate Republicans, and basically corporate rule in America. And I think that would probably resonate with a lot of Americans, but that is not what you will get from 90% of the media coverage of this. They will ask you, aren't you helping Republicans by doing a primary? Aren't you helping Trump by doing a primary? It's almost an effort to paint you as a right-winger when you're doing a left-wing challenge to Biden if you announce on March 4th. So how do you plan to combat what will be an enormous industry of misleading statements about why you're running?
I think there's an ameliorative quality to saying the truth as you understand it. All those things that you just talked about will happen. And one might say it's a ridiculous thing to think that this could get anywhere. But to that, Jack, I remind people that Trump became president. And he didn't become president by strategizing anything. He became president by hitting a nerve. And I think the nerve we need to hit at this point is the American realization that the American people have been played. We've been played for the last 50 years. And I think that more Americans are waking up to this. The kinds of things we talk about, whether it has to do with universal health care, tuition-free college, free child care, maternity leave, paternity leave, sick pay, these are considered moderate issues to any advanced democracy in Europe and elsewhere. And they should be considered moderate issues here. And if I get the chance on mainstream media, that's exactly what I will say.
Okay, and following up on that, so they will go back to 1976 to try to find an example of a primary hurting a sitting president. Now, you can go to many contemporary examples of primaries helping, whether it was the very contentious primary in 2016 for the Republicans or the contentious primary in 2020 for the Democrats, et cetera. There's tons of recent examples, but they will all of them in media, not even in politics, but in media, go back to 1980 when
1980 and Teddy Kennedy and
when Kennedy primaried Jimmy Carter, and they say that hurt Carter's chances of winning. So what is your battle plan for fighting back against basically a misleading idea that we know for a fact they will throw at you 200 times?
I'm not interested in fighting back against them. This is the fighting back thing is really what's the problem at this point. The Republicans are going to be fighting the Democrats. The Democrats are going to be fighting the Republicans. The Democratic candidate needs to say, I will fight poverty. I will fight lack of health care. I will fight the fact that your children have asthma because of the factories that should not be in your neighborhood. We will fight the fact that people are sick because of fossil fuel extraction, what it's doing to the environment and what it's doing to the planet. I'm not interested in the football game, and I don't think the American people are that interested in the kind of conversation that you were just talking about. And Gen Z isn't even watching mainstream media. I think a lot of the conversation that mainstream media has is less and less interesting to people who know that they're hurting and are less interested in the football game because they've figured out what's going on in this country. And it's not they're not interested in the spectator sport. They're interested in their own lives. And Capitalism has been weaponized against the American people. And unfettered, deregulated capitalism, it's almost a diabolical force at this point. It is sociopathic, it is pathological. It literally does not care if people drop dead. That's what you see in situations like East Palestine.
Marianne,
and so
I agree with you in regard to corporate media, certainly cable news. If you look at the demographics that consume that content, it's certainly not young individuals who are watching. But what do you do? What is your game plan in regard to reaching out to the individuals that you want to get your message out to, right? Those who actually want to hear about an economic plan that would benefit them as opposed to benefiting corporate interests?
You know, last time when I did this, Anna, I was saying a lot of these things last time, but there were two issues. First of all, there was Bernie Sanders, which I totally understand, but a lot of people, because they were so involved with Bernie, and believe me, I endorsed Bernie when I left. I adore Bernie. I adore Bernie. And it is true that because of Bernie taking up so much oxygen, some people were not listening to me at the same time in a way they might. Secondly, all this ridiculousness about me, the fairy dust that was thrown in people's eyes, that I'm anti-science and that I'm the crystal lady, and then I told people they didn't pray enough and that's why they got sick, and all that ridiculousness. I think I will have a greater capacity this time to counterpunch, which last time I don't think I knew how to do. You know, when I actually talked to audiences, people got it. People got it, people hear it. So what I'm going to do is to go out and speak to voters and also speak on the internet, speak on social media, and do all the things that you do during a campaign, and hope that this time, and I think that part of the due diligence that I did was finding out, will there be enough people this time who are willing to give me a listen? And I have a sense that there will be. I have a sense more and more people know Joe Biden beat Donald Trump. That's great. We're very grateful that we didn't go off that cliff, but we're still 6 inches away from the cliff. We're still Eleanor Roosevelt said to Franklin Roosevelt, we need more than the amelioration of suffering. We need genuine economic reform. For Joe Biden to go out in 2024 and to say to the American people that his message is that the economy is doing better, when you have people suffering with the economic despair and anxiety that the majority of Americans are suffering through every day, people are open to the message now. Why should it be so hard to survive? Joe Biden's going to help you survive. Why should it be so hard to survive in the richest country of the world? So we need to do more than hang out 6 inches away from the cliff. We need everyone to have a livable wage. We have 1/3 of America's workforce who live on less than $15 an hour. That's not a livable wage.
Yep.
So.
All right, it looks like on Friday, people might have a second alternative other than Joe Biden to vote in the Democratic primaries, and that is an exciting development. And we will certainly follow that very thoroughly here on TYT.
Thank you.
Marianne Williamson, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
God bless you, honey. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, well, we've got some time left, so why don't we get to our next story? Because speaking of Bernie Sanders, he has been promoting his book on a book tour, and over the weekend, he had an interview with Face the Nation that I want to talk about, so let's watch.
We have more income and wealth inequality today than we've ever had. We have more concentration of ownership in sector after sector than we have ever had. We have a political system which is increasingly corrupt, because as a result of Citizens United, billionaires can put enormous amounts of money into it to elect their candidates. And as you may know, I tried to get the Democratic Party to pass a resolution that in Democratic primaries, super PAC money should not be allowed to be used. Bottom line is what constrains any president is we have a corrupt political system in which big money plays an enormous role.
It's okay to be angry about capitalism. That's the message and title of Senator Sanders's new book, which is why he was on Face the Nation over the weekend. But his discussion with Margaret Brennan really focused on corruption and the impact that it has had, both in the media and also in the political decisions that are made by elected lawmakers. Now, in the next clip, he's gonna call out corporate media while on corporate media. But before we get to that, Cenk, you have been urging progressive lawmakers to specifically speak about corruption.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your thoughts on Bernie's comments there.
I have two critiques of what he said that I'm going to save for a little bit later. But I have to say that about 3 or 4 times in this 26-minute interview, Bernie did a great job of calling out corruption, which almost never happens on TV. And you could tell Margaret Brennan's reaction was not good.
Yes.
Like she was so uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable.
And that's great. That's what you want. You don't want them feeling perfectly, oh yeah, Medicare for all, you're gonna pay for that, and feeling comfortable saying weirdo things like that to protect their advertisers, etc. And she was combative throughout the entire interview. She would say, no. She didn't yell or anything like that. No, every question was framed from a corporate perspective.
Yes.
Everyone, right? So, you say universal health care, but how about Finland with their 56% tax rate?
Yes.
Right, and so, and on it went. So Bernie, thank you for having the courage to call out corporate media to its face.
Right.
And almost never happens in American politics. It's an excellent start, so great.
In fact, this next clip is where he specifically talks about the corporate influence of our media. So let's watch that.
We have, 8 major media conglomerates, corporate media conglomerates that control about what 90% of the American people see, hear, and read. Those are really issues that we need to discuss. That's what the book does.
Do you worry when you talk about the corporate media that you are targeting journalists when you say that?
No. Donald Trump talks about fake news, and that's simply to deflect attention from the fact that he's a pathological liar. My experience one-on-one with media, they work hard. They very rarely am I misquoted. But what I am talking about, Margaret, is that corporate media limits the kind of debate that we have in this country. You tell me, you know more about it than I do. How often do we talk about income and wealth inequality?
We're talking about right now, Senator.
Yeah, but how often? Not everybody is Bernie Sanders on your show. How often do you talk about concentration of ownership? How often do you talk about the fact that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care at all, and yet we spend twice as much money?
Oh God, I love that so much. And I especially love, you're right, Cenk, how uncomfortable Margaret Brennan is.
Yeah.
Right?
Are you attacking journalists?
Yeah.
I'd love to see a journalist first.
What, drawing a false equivalency between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump would point out the media in the back rows during his rallies, call them fake news and enemy of the people. Whereas Bernie Sanders is stating facts about how our media has been completely captured by corporate interests, these major conglomerates essentially having all this influence over the content and news that we watch, read, consume. That was fantastic.
He called out about 8 multi-billion-dollar corporations that control 90% of the news in America, right? And she says, are you calling out journalists? No, he just literally called out the owners, right? And that are interested in profit. And she makes it sound conspiratorial. Are you saying multi-billion-dollar corporations would be interested in profits? Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. And would they be interested in protecting their advertisers that give them those profits? Yeah, that's exactly what they would be, okay? So, but man, she's caught so many feelings over what I think is a very normal, like when Bernie was saying it, don't get us wrong, like we're watching it and we're going, yes, right? So it's so refreshing to see on mainstream media, which you never see.
Because we're not corporate media. She's part of corporate media.
But the reality is what he's saying is actually elementary.
Yeah.
Like if you ask people under 45 that didn't grow up on the drivel that is television news, they're all gonna tell you the same thing. But part of the reason I'm pointing it out is because she's so outraged. Do you get that in Washington, they live in a bubble where they've never heard anybody say, hey, you guys work for multi-billion-dollar corporations that care about their profits and you're not presenting the news accurately. They're like, what? They've only heard a right-wing critique, an insane right-wing critique of media. They've never heard the left-wing critique because they never allowed on air. And if they didn't like what Bernie was gonna say, wait till they get a load of my new book. They're gonna hate it.
Well, they're not gonna have you on. Let's just keep it real.
For sure.
You think Margaret Brennan's gonna have you on to talk about your book?
Look, chapter 5 is called The Matrix, and it's about how corporate media is the most important part of the puzzle for corporate rule, because it puts you back to sleep, okay? It tells you there's nothing wrong with the system at all. So you can check it out. You can pre-order tyt.com/justice, but back to Bernie.
So my favorite part of the conversation with Margaret Brennan had to do with how he delicately handled questions pertaining to Republican voters. And I think that this is instructive. I think this is the right way to talk to voters, specifically ordinary people who vote for the other side. Let's watch.
You say in the book that Democrats are wrong to suggest that former President Trump supporters are racists, sexists, and homophobes, that they're deplorable. You point out these so-called racists, many of them voted for Barack Obama, but their lives didn't improve. Do you think that the Democratic Party messaging is just entirely wrong-headed to frame this as a broader moral issue?
Look, are there supporters of Trump who are racist, sexist, homophobes? Absolutely. But to paint a broad brush and say, well, that's the reason that they don't vote for the Democrats, that is really wrong. Look, I've been all over this country. I have worked with trade unionists, people on strike, people who had the courage to stand up for economic injustice. Great people. And I talked to the union leaders, 70% of our people are Republican. Why is that? Because I think they have lost faith that the Democratic Party is going to stand up and fight for them.
He's 1,000% right about that, 1,000%, right? And the Democratic Party's inability to take ownership of their flaws and to take note of the accurate and valid concerns of the electorate is pretty gross. And instead of, by the way, focusing on that and focusing on improving, they've decided, no, we're gonna go on the offense and call anyone who votes for the other side racist. Because that's the winning strategy, right? To just brush people off as racist, bigots, who cares? We don't need them, they're deplorable. No, these are Americans. And as he accurately mentioned, Florida voted for Obama twice. So what happened? Did the demographics change so much that all of a sudden Florida went from voting for the country's first biracial president twice to all of a sudden being the biggest racists and bigots in the country?
Well, so the funny thing is, that's not why she's even asking the question. She asked in, again, about like 3 or 4 different instances, at least, it might have been even more than that, about, do you disagree with the Democrats, huh, Bernie?
Right.
Okay, that was the main point of that question. So the funny thing is, I actually think Bernie's not harsh enough on Republican voters. Believe it or not, my position is closer to Hillary Clinton's, in that I think she was exactly right that half of the Republican voters are deplorables. Yeah, they love the racism, sexism, half of them. But the other half, yeah, they voted for Obama. Yeah, not all of them did, but a lot of them did. And the other half have the same exact problems as we do. So on that, I completely join Bernie. The problem with Hillary Clinton's statement wasn't that she called half of them racist and sexist. It's that she had no answer for the other half. She couldn't then say, but hey, guys, don't worry. I'm gonna raise your wages. I'm gonna give you health care. I'm gonna help you with your life. Instead, she gave him the corporate Democratic position, which is there's no hope coming. I'm not gonna help you. I'm just gonna help my donors, right? So why is Brennan trying to set him up for this? Because if he dares run against Biden, everyone will use these quotes from this interview.
It's time to get the game plan ready, right? Preemptive strikes on Bernie should he consider primarying Biden. I don't think he's gonna primary Biden, okay?
No, you could see from the interview he's not gonna do it, but her job is to make sure they can get dirt on him, so later they could run segments going, Bernie Sanders was opposed to Democrats. Can you believe he's so against Democrats? He's not really a Democrat at all, as if he's a right winger. And that's the fundamental deception they do in regards to progressives in corporate media.
No, but like, okay, I'm just gonna say it, okay? What is the redeeming quality of the Democratic Party right now? Really, stop and think about it. When they campaign on some economic issues that are appealing to voters. But do they actually follow through on those promises? No, they don't. What's the other thing the Democratic Party is known for? Incessant, endless scolding. Endless scolding. Culture war-related scolding all day, every day. Okay, think about ordinary people. You think they wanna associate themselves with individuals who spend the majority of their time scolding over culture war issues because they have nothing else to offer to the American people because they're captured by corporate interests? It doesn't take much to see what's really going on, okay? Let's just be clear about that. And so all of this, like, oh my God, are you against the Democratic Party? Hell yeah, I am. The Democratic Party, as it stands today, is not serving the best interests of the very people who elected them in positions of power in the first place, okay? The Democrats are not God. No party is. Are they delivering or are they not delivering? And so far, all I've seen from the Democratic Party for decades now is a lot of talk about how they're gonna accomplish, policy that benefits blue collar workers, working class people. But again, once they're in positions of power, they don't deliver. Because again, they're funded by the same individuals, the same corporate interests that Republicans are, which is why, look, there's a lot of bipartisan activity happening in the halls of Congress. We see it all the time. When it comes to raising the debt ceiling, they'll make that carve out so they don't have to deal with the legislative filibuster that requires 60 senators to vote in favor of legislation to get it passed. When it comes to tax cuts, usually tax cuts pass pretty easily. When it comes to defense spending, no debate when it comes to defense spending. How many hundreds of billions of dollars were appropriated already for the war in Ukraine? No debate about it. So when it comes to issues that would funnel money from the bottom to the top, there's a lot of bipartisanship. When it comes to ordinary Americans and their economic needs, all of a sudden, legislative filibuster, one excuse after another coming from the Democratic Party, and we're supposed to celebrate them? Please.
So that gets to my critique of Bernie. So Anna's of course right. Like when Republicans say they're the party of Lincoln, that's a hilarious joke. They switched signs after the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act was passed. The Republicans did the Southern strategy, actively chose to be the party that embraced racists in the South. Let's be honest about that. That's the 50% that I think Hillary Clinton is right about, right? But are we still pretending the Democrats are the party of FDR?
I mean,
That's
if you are, you're either incredibly naive or you're just not paying attention.
No, you just don't. You've been brainwashed by corporate media. Oh, it's the same Democrats. It's the same. No, it's not. They're diametrically opposed to FDR. FDR's to the left of Bernie Sanders. Read history, please. Read a book. Okay. So now that's why. Then wait. You said why is that a critique of Bernie? Because there's two problems here. One is a lot of his commentary is diffuse. It hits corporate media in general, it hits corruption in general, which I love, all those are good. And those are the best parts, right? Hey, we need to have, income inequality is terrible. But in order to get change, you have to focus like a laser beam, right? And Bernie knows how to do that. He did that with Moderna and got great results. He did that with $15 minimum wage at Amazon and got great results. He even named the bill Bezos to go after Bezos personally. But whenever it comes to the second issue for Bernie, his other Achilles heel, which is Democratic colleagues, all of a sudden he can't be specific. So if you say this guy is corrupt, it will make tons of news. And people will talk about why he's corrupt. Name a Democratic senator, it doesn't matter. You can't swing a bat in the Senate without hitting a corrupt corporate Democrat, and not physically and literally, guys. Again, we're not right wingers, okay? But Bernie won't ever call them out because then people would catch feelings and they would say Bernie was being impolite and etc. But until you start calling them out by name, you're never gonna get change because the media will not focus on it.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back for the second hour of the show, we'll talk about Trump's latest meltdown in response to a puff piece that the New York Post wrote about Ron DeSantis. And later in the show, we'll talk about the tyranny of extremes when it comes to education. That and more coming right up.
But not everybody is Bernie Sanders on your show.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter, in this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it. And I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
Here at the Young Turks, we do our best to bring you the most essential news stories of the day, but we can't cover everything in a 2-hour show. And for the rest, I recommend Ground News. Founded by a former NASA scientist, Ground News uses a revolutionary system that analyzes where the news is coming from and gives you complete transparency on the potential biases these sources may have. That way, you can read between the lines of media bias and break free from the corporate media agenda. In arming you with the context and transparency, you'll have everything you need to think critically about the news and build responsible media literacy for yourself and others. With Ground News, you're not just mindlessly consuming the media, you're part of a movement that is working to hold them accountable and get straight to the facts. Break through the filter bubbles, the propaganda, and the bias, and subscribe to Ground News today.
Florida's ground zero for God's waiting
Can't
room.
Let that happen.
All right, back on TYT, Cheng and Anna with you guys. Toby just became a member, so he's also with us. Progressive Canuck just gifted 5 Young Turks memberships on YouTube. A Trophy gifted 5 on Twitch for a total of 268. Jeez, and Lord mercy. And Metal Turn total 571 gifted 5 on Twitch as well. He's got a total of 261. You guys are amazing, wonderful human beings. Thank you for bringing more members into the TYT community. Casper.
All right, let's do our next story. Man, Trump is having a hard time. Now, he read a glowing profile that the New York Post penned in regard to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and he didn't like it. And he's getting more and more belligerent in his attacks against DeSantis, which we'll get to in just a moment. But to be fair to Trump, the New York Post piece on DeSantis was definitely a puff piece. It was incredible. I'm gonna read you a few excerpts before we get to Trump's reaction to it. Selena Zito, who wrote the piece, writes that DeSantis narrowly won his first run for governor in 2018, but became the shining beacon for Republicans in the party's otherwise underwhelming performance in the 2022 midterms. She continues to write, he has done so by publicly tangling with Disney over their condemnation of the Florida State Legislature's parental rights in education bill, dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill by critics, and managing to clean up after the devastation, or managing the cleanup after the devastation of Hurricane Ian. And then she writes, even President Biden was forced to admit DeSantis's emergency efforts were remarkable. Okay. The entire piece also tries to paint DeSantis as this blue-collar warrior. He worked his way through college, paying his own way when he was going to Yale and all of that. They did also ask DeSantis about Trump in the piece. Selena Zito writes, now he is giving Trump a run for his money in nearly every national and state poll about a possible presidential run. He is also leading over Biden in a head-to-head matchup. Asked if the name on his high school locker was ever changed to DeSanctimonious, the derisive nickname bestowed upon him by Donald Trump, he laughs, quote, no, there weren't enough letters to be able to do that. I don't know if anyone even can spell that. Got him, got him. Okay, so we're gonna get to Trump in just a minute, but man, what stands out to me, right, aside from the Trump-DeSantis feud, is how right-wing media just comes together in an effort to prop up one candidate. And in this case, it's DeSantis.
So it's gonna be really interesting because Trump then is attacking that right-wing media, as we'll get to in a second.
I know I'm beautiful, but Cenk's talking.
Yeah, okay, all right, and we'll also get to me in a second. Okay. Nope, no, apparently we won't. Okay, anyways, so this piece was hilarious, guys. I almost want you to read this New York Post piece so you can see what propaganda looks like. It's like a perfect definition. Everything, as Anna said, was glowing about DeSantis, but even the pictures.
I know.
The pictures of like a cute little kid with a fish that he caught.
Baby pictures of him, yes.
Right?
Yep.
And then him swinging at a, like he's Mickey Mantle on Yale's team, right? Probably on a ball that he whiffed on. Anyway.
Some wedding pictures.
Wedding pictures, him in the military uniform twice, right?
Yep.
Everything was like glowing, this heroic picture. It earned praise even from Biden. He was forced to give him that praise. Biden loves Republicans, praises Republicans 24/7. Any given opportunity, he's like, oh, my Republican friends, I love working with them, right? So pure hilarious propaganda, but that isn't the interesting part. The right-wing media does propaganda for a living. And remember, we just found out from Rupert Murdoch, the leaked emails and texts that he told the CEO of Fox News, make sure that you help the Republicans win the Georgia Senate seats. So they definitely have an agenda, and their news division definitely propels that agenda, not just their opinion, folks. So New York Post, owned by Murdoch, is saying that they're declaring very forcefully in this article, we're for DeSantis and against Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. They're putting their thumb on the scale. And look, it's not a coincidence that right-wing media, it's all happening simultaneously. You get what I'm saying? All right.
Now back to Anna. What's going on, guys?
All right. I don't know if we're having technical issues, possibly.
Yeah, are we?
All right. You know what? Why don't we actually, let's go to break. I don't know what's happening. I think there might be a technical issue. So let's get that figured out.
Yeah,
we'll continue the story when we come back.
Yes, we'll tell you Trump's reaction, etc. when we return.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter in this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it, and I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
Here at the Young Turks, we do our best to bring you the most essential news stories of the day, but we can't cover everything in a 2-hour show. And for the rest, I recommend Ground News. Founded by a former NASA scientist, Ground News uses a revolutionary system that back on TYT. Sorry for the technical issue there, guys. Cenk and Anna with you guys. By the way, Toby, thanks for upgrading to premium membership. We're signing up for that in the first place. You're amazing. And I want to give a shout out to Riley Mola, who just became a member. Thank you, guys. Hopefully that'll help with our tech stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Casper.
Okay, so with all that said, why don't we go to Trump's reaction to the New York Post, which was actually pretty impressive because he managed to mention like Jeb Bush, Paul Ryan, Karl Rove, like what? None of those people were mentioned in the New York Post piece, but nonetheless, he writes, in writer Selena Zito's fake news puff piece about DeSantis, which supposedly appeared in the dying New York Post. What do you mean supposedly appeared? You read it.
It definitely appeared. We all saw it.
Which is way down in readership, just like Fox News is way down in ratings. Why doesn't she mention that he wants to cut Social Security and Medicare, loves losers like Jeb Bush, Paul Ryan, and Karl Rove, and is getting clobbered in the polls by me? Is he? DeSantis is a rhino who's trying to hide his past. I don't read the New York Post anymore. It has become fake news, just like Fox and the Wall Street Journal. So, I mean, it was a puff piece though.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah. It was. And look, Trump, of course, listed all these people who he has had, spats with in the past. Of course, we learned of those messages that Murdoch was sending to other executives over at Fox in regard to Trump and his election lies. So he's probably super salty about that. But we're also learning a lot about DeSantis from a new Washington Post piece that kind of gives you a timeline regarding his lack of support toward Trump, then support toward Trump once he felt that it would be politically advantageous to suck up to him. And now all of a sudden, DeSantis is wiping the internet of that embarrassing ad where he was sucking up to Donald Trump in the 2018 election for governor.
Yeah. By the way, Ron, we got news for you. We've got it saved.
Yeah.
Everyone has it saved. You're not going to be able to wipe the internet of anything, let alone a political ad you ran in Florida. So first, shocking turn of events. For the first time ever, Donald Trump is right about a puff piece and fake news. It is fake news. It's not like every part of it was ass kissing towards Ron DeSantis. It did not give his full record. It had no critique of him whatsoever. It was hilarious.
Zero critique.
Right? And I mean, it would take things like he went to Yale and turned it into, and he worked at an electrical wiring place like the blue collar guy that he is. And then they explain, oh, it was a summer job right before he went to Yale. Instead of saying like he got like a rando summer job before going to an elite school, they made it seem like, oh, blue collar guy.
No, but guys, that's important to focus on because look, the New York Post and right-wing media, they know what made Trump appealing to the base. And it was the honestly hollow, empty talking points that made it appear as though he was some sort of economic populist. Someone who actually understood the economic frustrations of ordinary blue-collar Americans. That's why they're trying to paint Ron DeSantis that way, even though there's really no indication that that's the case. Ron DeSantis went to elite schools. He's an elite politician serving as governor in Florida. And look, it doesn't even matter what his background is. What does he advocate for? And Trump is also correct about he'd want to cut Social Security and Medicare. There's no question about that. And to Trump's credit, for everything that he's done and everything that he said that I can't stand him for, he did say, don't touch Medicare and Social Security. That's going to hurt the Republican Party.
Yeah, whether he actually means it when he gets into office is a different question, but at least he said it, which is better than a lot of Republicans. So we're the fairest show in America. We hate Donald Trump for good reasons they explain, and we explain policy-wise why we do, right? But when he's right, we have no problem saying that he's right about something. So, and in fact, by the way, I would, if you said to me right now, pick DeSantis or Trump, I would pick DeSantis to win the Republican primary. But nonetheless, Trump is right about this, okay? And why did he mention randomly Paul Ryan and Karl Rove? Because Paul Ryan is on the board of Fox News, Karl Rove is a contributor to Fox News. And so is he right that Wall Street Journal, New York Post, and Fox News are against him? Yes, Rupert Murdoch owns all three, and he's clearly going to war against Donald Trump. So he's right to point out, and in the case of Murdoch, that's fake news is his bread and butter. That's all he's ever done is fake news. That was the whole point of Fox News. New York Post, last we checked in, loses $50 million a year every year. And he does that anyway to do propaganda pieces like this for politicians that he favors. He used to favor Donald Trump, now he's favoring Ron DeSantis. And so this war between Murdoch and Trump is winner take all.
It's delicious.
And it's amazing, and it's really important for the future of this country as to who wins. But nonetheless, even though in this case, I want Murdoch's guy over Trump, Murdoch is the guilty one in this equation because he's putting out total drivel and attacking Trump, who he loved before when he was giving him trillions of dollars in tax cuts.
We see his thumb, we see where it is. Yes. It's on the scale. All right, well, let's move on to something a little different, although Ron DeSantis plays a role here too. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is catching a lot of heat, justifiably, for wanting to do away with or limit certain advanced placement classes due to the race-based curriculum it offers. Now, to be sure, again, he deserves the criticism, but so do education officials who want to eliminate high school honors classes for a similar reason, but from a different perspective, again, having to do with race. I'll give you an example. The Culver City School District in Southern California is now considering essentially doing away with honors classes because they feel that those classes do not have enough diversity in its enrollment, okay? Now let me just say this. When it comes to honors classes, students decide whether they want to enroll in said classes, okay? This is not a situation in which school administrators handpick white students and ignore everyone else. Again, the students get to enroll should they want to challenge themselves with these honors classes. Well, since the start of the school year, freshmen and sophomores in Culver City, again, Culver City, California, have only been able to select one level of English class known as college prep, rather than the previous system in which anyone could opt into the honors class. The school officials say that the goal is to teach everyone with an equal level of rigor, which I'm not buying at all.
That doesn't even mean anything.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Come to me for a second so I can kind of give you the cover story coming from the school officials here. Their argument is, oh, no, we want, instead of offering honors classes for students who might find the regular curriculum incredibly boring and unchallenging, by the way, as I did when I was in high school, we're gonna do away with the honors classes that they would have been able to enroll in, and instead make the main curriculum rigorous and challenging, except we know that's not gonna happen. We know that's not gonna happen. Some students need extra help. Some students do, unfortunately, slow down, the pace of the class. It is what it is. You have people at different levels within the same classroom all the time. So doing away with options is ridiculous. I think it's incredibly stupid. If you're not seeing enough diversity in the honors classes, then how about encouraging some of the students, whether they be black students, brown students, what have you, to do it. Give them the motivation, tell them that they're up for the challenge.
Yeah, look, guys, we're stuck in the middle of a culture war, and we're the collateral damage.
It's insane.
The whole country. So, as Anna pointed out, in Florida, DeSantis said, well, I don't want the African American Studies AP class because it teaches too much about racism. What did you think it was going to teach about? He's like, I don't want that history, right?
I don't want that option for students.
Yeah, but then he said he threatened all of the AP classes. And so, and by the way, AP panicked then and started saying, okay, we're gonna take certain things out of the curriculum. We won't teach racism as much. It's disgusting, right? So there is an actual history, and you have to actually teach the history, not the version that you want, where your side is amazing and did nothing wrong. And what the hell's your side anyway, right? Aren't we all supposed to be Americans that look back at our past and go, oh, those were things that were bad, now we're making them better, right? All together. So the right wing is saying, no, let's obliterate these AP classes and no one's allowed to take them because I actually teach things that are true. Now you go to the left wing, yeah, and come on guys, get real, it's the left wing here in California.
Yes.
Culver City's in California, right? And look at this absurdity, equal level of rigor. Well, that's nonsensical. Let's say that it's math. There's algebra and there's calculus. Calculus is a lot more advanced than algebra is. So how do you teach it with an equal level of rigor? I mean, some kids when I was in public high school, in senior year, we're still taking algebra. And some kids were taking advanced AP Calc 3-4.
Doesn't matter, put them all in the same classroom.
How could they be in the same class? That makes no sense at all.
It makes no sense.
Okay, no, be honest with what you're doing. You're saying, I wanna eliminate AP classes because I wanna protect the feelings of some people.
That's actually 100% correct, and it's even noted in the reporting here. So again, I wanna emphasize, students get to decide whether or not they enroll in the honors classes. There's nothing stopping a student of color from enrolling in the class, okay? But here's what they say, okay? So in Santa Monica, California, for instance, the high school English teacher said last year that they had a moral imperative to eliminate honors English classes that they viewed as perpetuating inequality.
Absurd.
The teachers studied the issue for a year and a half, a district representative said. They say this is not a social experiment. This is according to a board member, John Keene. This is a sound pedagogical approach to education.
Just because you use the word pedagogical doesn't make it sound, okay?
So here's what the school district is saying in Culver City. So school districts doing away with honors classes argue students who don't take those classes from a young age start to see themselves in a different tier and come to think they aren't capable of enrolling in advanced placement classes that help with college admissions.
Well, they can't enroll if you took them all away. So I guess you solved the problem by nuking them.
So some students don't have the self-esteem, in their words, right, to enroll in these AP classes, these honors classes. And so the only thing to do is to eliminate the classes altogether so the students who want to be challenged with a more rigorous curriculum don't have that option. How is that smart? How is that a good method in improving education? Let me give you more. So Culver City English teachers presented data at a board meeting last year showing Latino students make up 13% of those in 12th grade advanced placement English, compared with 37% of the student body. Asian students were 34% of AP classes, compared with 10% of students. So Asian students are overrepresented. And then with Black students, they represented 14% of AP English versus 15% of the student body. So really what they're focusing here on is the lack of representation among Latino students in these honors classes.
Yeah.
So how about the educators and the administrators encourage these students to enroll in the classes? What is the issue here?
Yeah, so look, good news, for the first time ever, it's a racial issue and not about blacks and whites. Blacks are almost perfectly represented, and if you do the math on the remaining portion, it appears whites are pretty well represented. So bad news, now they're pitting Latinos versus Asians. And by the way, if you're on the left, how does that help? How does that help? I'll tell you what happens if you take away AP classes. For every Asian parent will be furious, okay? And who will they be furious at? Well, you'll tell them it's because Latino students didn't have enough representation in these schools, so we took them away from all of the students. So, well, they'll be furious at Latinos. But the Latinos didn't even ask you to take them away. You made that up in your head.
Exactly.
Okay, how's the better way to handle it? It's not complicated. You do your job, you reach out to the Latino community, you reach out to Latino students, and you help them. You don't punish others. That's so obvious. Look, I would argue, and I think anyone who lives in America will tell you, oh, that's kind of true, even if you're not supposed to say it. Asians and Latinos are probably the two hardest working groups in America, okay? So if you've got an incredibly hardworking group like Latinos, and you say, hey, if you work in this direction, you might get a higher income, et cetera, I bet they're super open to that, okay? But instead of doing that hard work, you're like, oh, let me take it away from Asians, let me take it away from everyone else, and make them fight each other. That doesn't help at all.
I just, look, and the other thing is, so when I was very young, I was a very sensitive kid. Like, I love to wallow in self-pity, bad self-esteem, all of that, until I came across Miss Robson in 5th grade, okay? Miss Robson had no patience for feeling bad about myself, okay? Like, her whole motto was, I can and I will. She had a sign in front of the classroom. And anytime there was even an inkling of, I don't know if I can do this, she would, not physically, but she would try to smack it out of you, right? No, there's no feeling bad for yourself, you can and you will, you can and you will. Until it was drilled in my head and I started to believe it. Educators feeding into the lack of self-esteem that students might be feeling and indulging in that is not helpful, okay? They should give them the self-esteem to be able to challenge themselves and do so confidently. I just think there's so much indulgence, like so much like, oh my gosh, like let's wrap the children in bubble wrap because they feel bad about themselves. No, help them see the light and help them build the confidence that they need to move forward in life. What are we doing?
Yeah, I remember when I came in as a young immigrant, I started at the lowest reading level, right? If we went with this new approach, they'd be like, okay, that's it, stop all the higher level reading levels. No, well, because Jake's discouraged, he's a young immigrant, doesn't know English yet, he's super discouraged, we don't want him discouraged, wrap him in bubble wrap. No, what happened was I worked hard, Mrs. Rosenberg in 4th grade, believed in me and moved me up to the highest reading level. I've told this story before and I love her for it, okay? That's how it's supposed to go. If you have faith in the students, you teach the students the right things, et cetera. And what if they had said, okay, you know what, we're taking away all AP classes, all honors classes. And you, Cenk, you're a Muslim, Turkish immigrant to this country. You're not allowed to go in them anymore. Wait, why am I being punished? I'm also a person of color. Why don't I get to go in those classes? No, it's hurting the feelings of some people. So we wrapped all of you in bubble wrap and none of you are allowed to advance. It's beyond crazy. So there they are. the right wing in Florida going, if you're teaching real things, we don't like it, we want propaganda instead. Tomorrow we'll probably share a story for you guys where they're now trying to put in like Christian themed testing instead. Pure propaganda will not give the kids actual education. And then we got California going, yes, but we don't want education that's too good. Instead, let's make it racial and have everybody fight one another.
It's insane. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, the train wreck that is otherwise known as Marjorie Greene makes an appearance on the show. That and more coming up.
So a couple of programming notes here. First of all, don't forget to check out Indisputable Dr. Rashad Ritchie as a podcast as well. So, and give it 5 stars if you can. If you can, check out all the shows in our podcasting network. And if you can, give all them 5 stars if you believe that, obviously. And Indisputable is a great way to consume Indisputable is by listening to it in podcast form. Now, there's another news source I'm going to tell you about. It's Ground News. And they collect all the news from the left, the right, and the middle, and then they share with you guys the source of it so you can make informed decisions and see how the different outlets are covering the news in different ways, which is kind of trippy. You put it all in one place, and it is kind of a remarkable way of looking at the news. What are the different perspectives? And they also grade the factuality as well as the ownership of the news articles that you're seeing. So check it out, ground.news/TYT, ground.news/TYT. Of course, whenever QR code is up there, you can click on the QR code to get to it as well. And now, let me go to YouTube Super Chat. First of all, I want to thank Box Park 454 for the generous contribution. You're awesome, we appreciate you. Kyle Marks wrote on Super Chat, Marianne, hear what you're saying, but can we as a people, what can we as people do because voting isn't working? Kyle, voting in primaries does work. They're trying super hard to get you to not vote in Democratic primaries. They don't want you to do that because if you do that, you might actually pick a Democrat who's going to represent you. So brother, first thing you got to do is yes, vote, and definitely in the primaries, okay? And then there are many other things to do, but don't neglect to do that because then you're going to lose all hope. So, and by the way, if you really want to piss off corporate Democrats and corporate media, vote in Democratic primaries. That's the #1 thing that they hate. Prague, Kansas wrote in, to all your viewers in Wisconsin, there's a statewide election for a justice in the state Supreme Court. Google the candidates and vote. So we're putting out the voting message, and you guys are too. Trish Mary said in YouTube membership section, I needed to listen to TYT years ago before Obama. I might have learned sooner. We thank you for the vote of confidence there for us. We appreciate it. Guillermo Gonzalez said, I love the answer of we're talking about it now to how often do you talk about these issues? Accidentally gave an honest answer, that's the only time. That's referring to the Bernie Sanders interview on CBS where they're like, whoa, we're talking about it now. The only time is because you're talking to Bernie Sanders. You never talk about it otherwise, the exception proves the rule. Great point, Guillermo. Donald James X wrote in, I'm voting for Williamson if I have that option for sure. And you will have that option. That's how that primaries work. Don't listen to the corporate media telling you not to vote and that it hurts the Democratic Party. Total nonsense.
Can't let that happen.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, more news.
Marjorie Greene is at it again. Let's watch.
I know a ton of white people that are as lazy and sorry and probably worse than black people I know.
Marjorie Greene managed to insult financially struggling Americans and all black people in one fell swoop. Probably the only thing that she's managed to accomplish. Now that video is making its rounds, even though it was pretty much an older video. She filmed it somewhere between 2017 and 2020, but it's getting a lot more attention now because Patriot Takes on Twitter has brought it back up. And so, she was responding to a New York Times piece. It was an editorial that was published in 2017 titled, "Can My Children Be Friends with White People?" It was written by a law professor and the law professor analyzed the complicated relationship between white and black Americans, which I don't think needs to be that complicated, to be quite frank with you. But nonetheless, let's hear more from Marjorie Greene and what she had to say.
He says, likewise, despite centuries of exclusion and robust evidence of continuing racism, minority underemployment is often couched in the language of bad choices and personal responsibility. I gotta tell you, anybody's unemployment has to do with bad choices and personal responsibility. And again, that does not have a skin color. I know a ton of white people that are as lazy and sorry and probably worse than black people I know. And I would not hire them because they're lazy and they're sorry and they're pathetic. And that has everything to do with their bad choices and their personal responsibility. That is not a skin color issue either. That's a people issue.
You know what? I mean, there is something she's saying there that is worth really investigating here, because I can think of at least one white person who's incredibly lazy, incredibly useless, and admitted as much candidly recently. Let's watch.
The nature of this job, it keeps members of Congress and senators in Washington so much of the time, too much of the time, to be honest with you, that we don't get to go home and spend more time with our families, our friends, all in our district, or maybe just be regular people, because this job is so demanding. It's turned into practically year-round. And for those of us in the House of Representatives, we have to run for Congress every 2 years. So you're practically campaigning nearly the entire time that you're here serving as a representative. It's not a life that I think is like something that I enjoy, because I don't enjoy it, but I'm committed to this job because I believe in it.
Can you believe it? Being a United States Congresswoman is a year-round job?
Yeah, do any of you guys have a job out there that is so demanding that it's year-round?
My God.
Isn't that all of our jobs? Guys, it's a psychological phenomenon called projection, okay? And she should really look into it. She's like, can you believe they're making me work over here? I thought I was just gonna do podcasts and weirdo racist, videos online. And now I have to show up to work all year?
I can't hang out with my friends?
Okay.
What? By the way, where are you on paid family leave, Marjorie Greene? Paid family leave, meaning woman goes through the physical and emotional trauma of delivering a baby and gets no mandatory paid time off in this country. Where are you on that issue? I want to hear from you on that.
Yeah, she's like, I don't get to spend enough time with my family. Which family? Anyways, okay, so, but back to the main issue here. Two things. Number one, look at how she views anyone who's poor.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
And on this one, it's true that race doesn't matter. She said anyone who's unemployed is, I forget the exact words she used, but you can rewind the tape and say, like, basically lazy.
Pathetic. She said pathetic.
Anyone who's unemployed? How about all the people that were fired at the beginning of COVID?
How about
They're all lazy? Millions of them got fired at the same time because millions of them decided to be lazy at the same time?
What about the 2008 economic collapse and all the people who got laid off and lost their jobs through no fault of their own?
By the way, the bankers who she readily supports.
Yep.
All this populist garbage. She doesn't mean a word of it. oh yeah, I like guns and I'm not big on the minorities and America first, but give the bankers everything, give them all. But you people that the bankers got fired, you're pathetic, okay? So understand who she is. She's just a wolf in sheep's clothing of pretending to be a populist.
So
supporting the rich 2,000%.
She also had some strong feelings about how Black Americans should feel about Confederate statues. So unfortunately, we're gonna hear her thoughts on that. Let's watch.
I don't think you remove or erase history. So I do agree those statues shouldn't be taken down. They're part of our history. We should learn from our history. We don't erase it. But that doesn't make me a racist because I say leave the statue up there. If I were Black people today and I walked by one of those statues, I would be so proud because I'd say, look how far I have come in this country. Look how far my people what they have overcome.
Listen, if you thought that was an incredibly ignorant statement, you would be correct. And I have further proof of her ignorance because she loves to celebrate statues, right? Including a statue that, well, she thought it was a Confederate statue. So let's go to this graphic. She took a picture. Tonight, I stopped at the Wilder Monument in Chickamauga, Georgia, which honors the Confederate soldiers of the Wilder Brigade. I will always defend our nation's history. Except, I know this is super inconvenient, but John T. Wilder was a Union colonel who commanded the much feared Lightning Brigade during several Southern campaigns of the US Civil War.
Oops, I wonder if she then instantly became less proud. Oh, that was an American, sorry, I didn't mean to praise an American. I meant to praise the people who betrayed America.
Right.
So let's break down the racial stuff now. Number one, on the statues. Can you imagine if they left up the Nazi generals' statues in Germany?
And then
and then said to Jews,
right,
you should be really proud to still have Nazi generals staring down at you that we celebrate in the public sphere by putting up these giant statues of them like they're heroes.
That's celebrated by local government. Look, that's the difference. If this is really about history, put the statues in a museum somewhere and call it a day. But putting those statues, like the municipal government, the local government, erecting those statues to celebrate Confederate soldiers and essentially send a message to Black residents of these towns. I mean, you know what it's really about. It's not about history.
And not only that, they put a lot of them up, not after the Civil War, but during the Civil Rights era to say, hey, remember who's still in charge here. And you're supposed to be proud walking by that? Hell no. I love one of our contributors on Rebel Headquarters, Mondale Robinson. He's a mayor in a small town in North Carolina. And he regulated on one of those statues, okay? He's like, no, this is our town and we're not gonna have this crap up here, okay? So look, back to the original racial comment. A lot of right wingers will listen to her going, no, look, it's not about skin color. Some white people I know are just as bad as terrible Black people and think that she's genuinely not being racist. She said some white people were probably worse than Black people I know. Probably. She's like, the worst white people I know are probably worse than all the Black people I know, but I'm not sure. But they genuinely don't see it. Guys, that is racist. You're assuming that all Black people are terrible, and even though in your mind, the lowest, most pathetic white people might or might not be as bad as all Black people. Can you see how that's obviously racist? It's amazing that they can't see it.
All right, let's go to round two of Marjorie Greene. Congresswoman Marjorie Greene resurrected her calls for a national divorce this week, arguing that Republican and Democratic states, red states and blue states, need a much needed separation. She argues the federal government needs to shrink, but not enough to stop regulating the bodies of women and transgender individuals. But nonetheless, let's give you her latest tweet where she says, we need a national divorce. We need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to says this.
I don't doubt it.
From the sick and disgusting woke culture issues shoved down our throats to the Democrats' traitorous America Last policies, we are done. Now, I mean, if you poll Americans on most substantive issues, there's actually a lot of agreement within the American electorate, regardless of which political party they affiliate with. But it's lawmakers like Marjorie Greene who have an interest in dividing the country, who have an interest in hyper-focusing on culture war issues, which many are manufactured by the right wing in order to divide and conquer. It's their bread and butter, it's what they do. So we're all fighting each other while those in positions of power do what? Do they represent our best interests? Do they pass policies that actually address the problems that we're facing economically? No, never, they never do that. But they'll continue with the culture war narratives because it divides us. They love it. It works every time, and that's the most frustrating part about it.
So of course, as usual, this is disgusting. I'm gonna break down how, but the last part is how funny it is, so don't miss that. Number one, she says, can you believe these, I mean, in the same tweet, these traitorous Democrats. Well, she says, let's break up America.
I know.
But wait, that would make you the traitor, wouldn't it? I mean, that's literally by definition. When you say, let's end the country we know as the United States of America. It's in the title. It's in the title of our country. And she goes, we shouldn't be the United States of America. I hate that thing. Let's do it. Let's make sure that we separate out, I don't know, like maybe the North and the South did earlier. And yeah, the Confederate traitors that you constantly talking about how much you love them. We just did a story about how you praised this great statue because you thought it was Confederates, but it turns out it was Union guys. You're like, so yeah, the last time you traitors did that, it cost us 600,000 American lives. Okay, but now the hilarious irony. She's from Georgia. Georgia voted for Biden. They voted for Obama twice. And they have 2 Democratic senators.
Where do you go, my lovely? I wanna know, where do you go? Because Georgia don't want you. I mean, think about it, right? Is Georgia a blue state, red state?
No, right now, as things stand, if you had the national divorce, Georgia is definitely a blue state.
You'll be exiled.
So,
and we don't want you.
Dumbass, you'd be stuck with us, okay? And mainly we'd be stuck with you. You live in a blue state, moron. I know, because everyone she talks to is like, oh yeah, man, I hate liberals, I hate minorities. Oh yeah, Georgia was so, oh man, if we had the Confederacy again, and white people were more equal than others. They say without irony, okay? Except those are not the only people that live in Georgia. And the majority of people in Georgia voted for Biden and Obama and all those Democratic senators. So sad day for you. But they're back, guys, they're back. And I know sometimes even people on the left go, oh, maybe we should do a national divorce. No, United States of America.
Yeah, the problem is, I think people like Marjorie Greene lead to ordinary people like feeding into that division, when in reality, we should see each other as fellow Americans. Even if we have some disagreements policy-wise, at the end of the day, we should be working together to fight the powerful, not allow the powerful to divide us and have us fight each other while they're essentially helping corporations rob us through insane tax cuts, tax subsidies, all these little benefits that they get. All of the research and development money, tens of billions of dollars that get funneled into pharmaceutical companies, right? So then they turn around and price gouge us. They aid and abet all that behavior. But we wouldn't know it because we're too busy fighting each other, right? I mean, it's just, I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of it.
And of course, the great irony here is that Marjorie Taylor Greene is an elitist. And she, I mean, we just did the story about how she thinks anyone who's unemployed is pathetic and lazy, right? And she, what did she call it? She woke out and called out the woke companies. Oh, they care about diversity, right? Did she ever call out any corporation since she's been a United States congressperson saying, hey, can you believe that they're paying you low wages? They're not doing safety regulations, having these giant mushroom clouds over Ohio. Any of the things that corporations do wrong? No, because she loves those corporations. She serves those corporations, and that's the master that she wants all of you to serve.
All right, bonus episode is next. It's gonna be lit. Don't miss it, tyt.com/join. We'll see you there.
We have to run for Congress every 2 years.
Dumbass.
concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic